My husband died on a Tuesday morning in October, and by Thursday, I was standing at his graveside alone. Not alone, like surrounded by friends, but missing family. Alone. Like there were 11 people total at the funeral of a man who had lived for 34 years, coached youth soccer for 6 of them, and never once forgot a birthday. 11 people. His 2 college friends who flew in from out of state, his aunt from Phoenix who drove through the night, a few neighbors, his coworker named Doug who barely knew him but showed up anyway in a wrinkled button-down that I will never forget, and me. My parents were not there. My brother was not there. My sister-in-law was not there. None of my cousins, none of the people I had grown up calling family. They were 4 hours away at my cousin Tiffany's bachelorette weekend in Savannah. I found out 2 days before the funeral when my mom called me, not to ask how I was holding up, not to tell me she had already booked a flight, but to explain, in a very measured and careful voice, that they had paid for the hotel rooms back in March and the deposits were non-refundable. My husband had been sick for 14 months. They had known for 14 months this was coming. I want to tell you that I said something powerful in that moment. Something that crystallized exactly how I felt. But the truth is, I didn't say anything at all. I just sat there on the bathroom floor in the dark, with the phone against my ear, listening to my mother explain cancellation policies to me 2 days after my husband stopped breathing. His name was Aaron. Aaron Beckett. He was 34 years old, and he had one of those laughs that made other people laugh just by hearing it. Big and unself-conscious, the kind you could hear from 2 rooms away. He coached U10 soccer on Saturday mornings, not because our kids played, we didn't have kids yet, but because his old coach had meant something to him and he wanted to be that for somebody else. He was diagnosed with ALS in August of the year we turned 32. We had been married for 3 years. We had just put an offer on a house. I want to be careful here because I don't want this to turn into a tragedy inventory, a list of everything we lost and everything we didn't get to do. That's not what this is. What this is about the people who were supposed to show up and didn't. When Aaron was first diagnosed, my family rallied. That's the word I'd use. They called, they sent things. My mom drove up the first weekend and cried in our kitchen and held both of our hands and said we would get through this together. My brother texted constantly. My dad, who is not an emotional man, left me a voicemail that I still have saved somewhere that just says, "I love you and I'm proud of how strong you are," and nothing else. I believed them. That was the first mistake. The first sign came about 4 months in, around Christmas. Aaron was still walking then, still working part-time from home, still making breakfast on Sunday mornings, even though it took him longer than it used to. My family came for the holidays and the visit was fine. It was good even. But there was this undercurrent I couldn't name. This sense that they were waiting for it to be over. Not Aaron specifically. Just the difficulty. The weight of it. They wanted the version of our lives that didn't require them to be uncomfortable. My mom started saying things like, "You need to think about yourself too," in a way that sounded like care but landed like permission. Permission to step back, to not show up as much, to let the professionals handle it. She suggested hospice 6 months before we needed it. She sent me articles about caregiver burnout when what I needed was someone to come sit with Aaron so I could sleep. My brother visited twice in 14 months. Twice. He lives 90 minutes away. My sister-in-law, his wife, told me once, in what I think she believed was a kind voice, that it must be almost a relief knowing what was coming, knowing we could prepare. As if a scheduled death is somehow easier than a sudden one, as if watching someone disappear piece by piece over a year is better than not having to watch at all. I didn't respond to that either. I was getting very good at not responding. The thing nobody tells you about being a caregiver is how transactional the people around you become, not strangers. Strangers are often surprisingly kind. I mean the people who love you. They start keeping score in a way that they never did before. They call and you can feel them calculating. Did I check in enough this week? Am I still a good person? Can I bring up my own problems now, or is it too soon? And the ones who can't do the math, who get tired of recalibrating, they just drift. Slowly at first. Fewer calls, shorter visits, texts that say, thinking of you, instead of, I'm coming over Saturday, what do you need? By month 8, my parents were visiting once a month. By month 11, it was once every 6 weeks. My brother had a reason every time: work, the kids, his wife's family, a thing that came up. There was always a thing that came up. I stopped asking, not out of pride exactly, more out of this exhausted pragmatism where I finally accepted that waiting for people to show up was just adding a second layer of grief on top of the one I was already carrying. Aaron noticed. He was losing his voice by then, using a communication device more and more. But he noticed. One night he typed out, "You deserve better than this," from all of them. I told him it was fine. He gave me a look that said he did not believe me, and also that we had been married long enough that he was not going to push it. He died on a Tuesday at 6:14 in the morning. I was holding his hand. The hospice nurse was there. His aunt was on a plane. She made it by noon, sat with me in the kitchen, and didn't try to say anything useful. Which was exactly right. I called my mom at 6:47. She answered on the second ring. She cried. "I want to be fair," she cried. She said she was so sorry. She said she loved me. And then, about 4 minutes into the call, she said, "We'll figure out the funeral logistics once we know the date, okay? Because the Savannah trip is that weekend and we already—" I hung up. Not dramatically. I didn't throw the phone or say anything. I just pressed the red button and set the phone face down on the counter and stood there looking out the window at the backyard where Aaron had put up a bird feeder the previous spring and never quite gotten around to taking down. She called back twice. I didn't answer. The next 2 days are a blur in the way that the worst days always are. Not blank, just compressed, like everything is happening at half speed in a room with bad lighting. I made arrangements. I picked a casket. I wrote an obituary. I called Doug from Aaron's office because he had asked months earlier if there was anything he could do, and I finally had an answer. My mom texted a few times. My dad called once and left a voicemail explaining again about the hotel deposits, about Tiffany's feelings, about how Aaron would have understood. I still haven't listened to that voicemail all the way through. The morning of the funeral, I woke up at 5. I made coffee. I put on the dress I had bought for a work event 2 years ago. Black, simple. Aaron had said it looked nice. I drove to the cemetery alone. Doug was already there when I arrived. He was straightening his collar, looking uncertain about whether he'd come to the right place, and when he saw me, he said, "I brought flowers. I didn't know if that was, I just thought." And I said it was perfect, and I meant it completely. 11 people. 62 degrees, partly cloudy. The pastor spoke for about 15 minutes. Aaron's college friend, Miles, told a story about a road trip they took junior year and everyone laughed. The real kind, and I was grateful for that. His aunt held my hand the entire time. My phone buzzed twice during the service. I had already put it on silent, but I could feel it. I checked it after, when people were moving toward the cars. 2 texts from my mom. "We're just heading to brunch, thinking of you so much today. And then, call when you're ready to talk." I know this is hard for everyone. I put my phone back in my purse and walked to Aaron's aunt's car, and she drove us to a diner nearby where we ate eggs and toast and talked about him for 2 hours. And that was, genuinely, the best I had felt in weeks. The fallout happened slowly and then all at once, the way these things do. My family came back from Savannah on Sunday. My mom called Sunday evening. This time with a different energy. Softer, more careful. Like she had spent the weekend rehearsing. She said they felt terrible. She said they hoped I could understand the position they were in. She said family was complicated and she knew I was hurting. But she hoped I wouldn't make any decisions out of grief that I would regret. I asked her one question. If Aaron had been the one left behind, if I had been the one who died, would he have gone to Savannah? She didn't answer. I already knew the answer. So did she. I told her I needed some time and I would be in touch. I hung up. That was 6 months ago, and I have talked to her exactly twice since then. Once when my grandmother had a health scare, and once at Christmas because it was Christmas, and I wasn't ready to blow up the whole thing entirely. Both conversations were polite and brief, and felt like talking to someone I used to know well. My brother texted me a long message the week after the funeral. It came in at 11 p.m., which told me he had been working himself up to it. He said he was sorry. He said he should have been there. He said work had been brutal and his wife's family had drama, and he knew that didn't excuse anything. But he just needed me to know he loved me and he was there for me going forward. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond for 4 days. When I did, I said, "I hear you. I'm not ready to talk yet." He said, "Okay." He's texted a few times since then. Short things, low pressure. I haven't shut the door completely on my brother. I don't know if I will. My sister-in-law sent a flower arrangement. There was a card that said, "With deepest sympathy," in pre-printed script and her name signed underneath in purple pen and nothing else. I put the flowers on the kitchen table and looked at them for a few days and then threw them away. Here is the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I couldn't have told you 14 months ago when all of this started. I am not angry anymore. I was for a long time. I drove around angry. I woke up at 3 in the morning angry. I had conversations in my head where I said everything I hadn't said to my mother's measured, careful voice on the phone. But somewhere between the funeral and now, the anger burned through itself. What's underneath it is something quieter and more permanent. Not forgiveness exactly, more like clarity. I see my family accurately now in a way I didn't before. I'm not saying they're monsters. They're not. They're people who are capable of love in small amounts, in comfortable circumstances, when it doesn't cost them anything. They showed up for the easy parts. The diagnosis, the initial shock, the casseroles in the first month. They were good at the beginning. What they couldn't do was stay. They couldn't sit in the hard part with us for the long stretch. And when the moment came that asked the most, not even very much, honestly, just to get in a car and drive 4 hours to stand next to me at a graveside, they chose the hotel deposit. That tells me everything I needed to know. I just wish I hadn't needed the information. The thing that surprised me most in the aftermath, the thing I genuinely didn't expect, was how not destroyed I was. I was grieving. I am still grieving. There are days that ambush me, usually ordinary ones. I'll be in the grocery store reaching for the brand of coffee Aaron liked, and suddenly I can't breathe right. That hasn't stopped, and I don't think it will for a long time, maybe ever. And that's just the topography of loving someone you lose. But the family part, the abandonment part, I'm okay. Better than okay. Because the moment I stopped waiting for them to show up, I had all this space that I filled, slowly and then faster, with people who actually wanted to be there. Aaron's aunt calls me every Sunday. Doug and I have a standing lunch on the first Friday of each month. He has a daughter in college and a dry sense of humor and no idea how much those lunches mean to me. 2 women from Aaron's soccer parents group started texting me after the funeral. Quietly, consistently, just checking in without making a big thing of it. One of them brought me soup in February for no reason except that she was thinking of me. Those people were there the whole time. I just hadn't seen them clearly because I was always looking toward my family, waiting for something that wasn't coming. I moved in January. Not far, different neighborhood, same city, but enough that I wasn't driving past all of it every day. I painted the bedroom a color Aaron would have liked. I kept the bird feeder up. I'm back at work full-time now, and I have a window in my office that gets morning sun, and sometimes I drink my coffee there before the day starts and just sit with it. I don't know what happens next with my family. My mom texted last week, a picture of my niece, no message. I looked at the picture for a long time. My niece is 4 years old and she didn't choose any of this, and I love her without complication. Everything else I'm still figuring out. What I want you to take from this, if you take anything. And I'm not saying this is a lesson. I hate when stories pretend to have neat lessons. I'm just saying it because it's true. The people who show up in the worst moment are your people. Not the ones who were there in the beginning with the casseroles and the phone calls. Not the ones who love you in theory. The ones who get in the car. Aaron knew that. He had a way of seeing people clearly, seeing exactly what they were capable of, and loving them for it, without expecting more. I used to think that was resignation. Now I think it was the most adult thing about him. I'm trying to learn it. I'm also trying to be, for the people around me, the kind of person who gets in the car. That's the whole thing, really. That's all I've got. Doug wore a tie to the funeral. It had little soccer balls on it. I didn't notice until after, when we were at the diner and he was loosening it, and when I pointed it out, he looked down at it like he'd forgotten what he was wearing and said, His coworker mentioned the soccer coaching, and I just thought, and I laughed, the real kind. For the first time in days, he was there. He got in the car. That's what I'm going to remember. I've thought a lot about what actually happened. Not the surface version, not the "my family missed the funeral" headline, but the real sequence underneath it. And what I keep landing on is this. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to be the kind of person who chooses a bachelorette weekend over a graveside. It happens in increments. It happens in every small choice that came before, every visit that got shortened, every call that went to voicemail. Every time someone chose comfort over presence, and nothing bad happened, so they chose it again. My family didn't fail me on the day of Aaron's funeral. They failed me across 14 months of smaller moments that nobody was keeping score on. By the time the real test came, the pattern was already set. They just followed it to its logical end. That's the thing about character, your own and other people's. It doesn't reveal itself in the dramatic moments. It builds quietly in the ordinary ones. Every time I drove to a chemo appointment alone and didn't call them because I already knew they'd have a reason, I was learning something true about who they were. I just wasn't ready to accept the lesson yet. What I've had to reckon with, and this took longer than I'd like to admit, is my own part in it. Not the guilt kind of responsibility, not I should have demanded more. More like I kept extending credit to people who had shown me, repeatedly, that they weren't going to spend it. I kept believing the version of my family that existed in the beginning, in those first phone calls after the diagnosis, and I refused to update the picture even as the evidence changed. That's not loyalty. That's just a refusal to see clearly. Aaron saw clearly. He always did. He typed out, "You deserve better than this," months before the end, and I told him it was fine, and it wasn't fine, and somewhere he knew that and loved me anyway, without making me feel stupid for hoping. There's something in that I'm still learning, the intelligence to see people as they actually are, not cruelly, not without compassion, but accurately. That's a form of self-respect. It's not cynicism. It's just paying attention and being willing to let the information land. The resilience part surprised me. I thought losing Aaron and then losing my family's version of itself at the same time would break something in me permanently. Instead, I found that grief, when you actually sit in it instead of running sideways into other people's feelings about your grief, has a floor. You hit it, and it holds. And once you know the floor is there, you stop being quite so afraid of falling. Doug showed up in a tie with soccer balls on it because a coworker mentioned it once in passing and he filed it away and acted on it. That's it. That's the whole of what I'm trying to be now. Someone who files things away and acts on them. Someone who gets in the car. What you put into the world in the quiet moments is what shows up when it counts. My family taught me that. Aaron lived it. I'm working on it every day.